Hey, good morning, everybody. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the oil for rubles scheme, which Russia put in place a couple of months ago for what they call unfriendly countries who were against what they've done in Ukraine to try to defend the ethnic Russians in the east of Ukraine when forces were massing on the border ready to go and as they see it, invade, take back those areas and integrate them back into the wider Ukraine and just get rid of these two little republics there, the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics that were ethnic Russian. And NATO was fully supporting the puppet regimes in Ukraine, which have not been following the Minsk Accords for the last 8 years. First of all, Poroshenko, now Zelensky, the collective West has been supporting those regimes and supporting arming those regimes to the teeth this year after the beginning of what Putin calls the special operation, what in the West is called the conflict, and some people are even now openly starting to call it a war. Whatever you call it, it's not good, and ordinary people are suffering, whether it's in Ukraine or Russia or the West. But the point of this is we know about oil for rubles, and that was done because the collective West, the leaders of the collective West, decided they were going to fight an economic war against Russia. You have people like Liz Truss, the UK Foreign Secretary, saying we want to cripple the Russian economy. Well, it's not got nothing to do with us, what is going on in Ukraine. So that was a very, very foolish thing to say. And in the United States, the European Union, other entities around the collective West have all put in place sanctions on the Russian government and individual Russian oligarchs and so on. I mean, the United States has actually frozen £300 billion $300 billion of Russian money, Russian assets that were deposited in banks in the United States to partake in international trade. So they essentially, freezing, stealing Russian money. Some of them are actually trying to steal it and make it legal to steal the money and then say, we're going to use the money to rebuild Ukraine, which, of course, it will just disappear into the pockets of people who are connected to the Biden regime and so on. Of course, the EU has been very unfriendly to Russia as well, talking about sanctions and all kinds of things, and getting involved in shipping weapons to the Zelensky regime in Ukraine as well. So it's not surprising that Russia calls the collective West unfriendly countries and put in place the oil for rubles scheme, whereby Western countries, Western companies have to buy oil in rubles from a bank in Moscow because they can't put in, if they do it through the United States, it will just get sequestered and frozen. So, they can't pay for oil and gas in Western banks anymore because that will be frozen. But then the leaders are complaining about this, which doesn't make it, any sense. It's just would have inevitably happened as a reaction to sanctions on Russia. From the beginning, I've been saying sanctions on Russia are going to backfire. They have backfired. They've made the price of oil and gas in the West far, far higher, and that is seen. It knocks on in the petrol stations and in the price of electricity and gas. But what's incoming is food for rubles, or commodities for rubles. And right now you have all kinds of alarmist pieces being written all over the Western mainstream media about food shortages coming in and blaming Putin for a blockade of Ukraine. Well, there wouldn't be a blockade of Ukraine if the West had not been continuing to arm National Socialists in Ukraine to continue the conflict there, or to prop up the Zelensky puppet regime. This would all have been over probably far, far quicker, and we could have got back to normal relations with Russia and Ukraine, and everyone could have just sat round the table and got back to normal. But there are some people who want to prolong this in the West, and of course, well, Russia is not going to make it easy for the West when the West is being hostile to Russia and accelerating and escalating the conflict rather than de-escalating, which is what they should have done. But the bellicose rhetoric coming from people in Western leaders and so on continues. So, you know, at the beginning, Liz Truss, the UK Foreign Secretary, said, we want to cripple the Russian economy. Well, you know, if you say that, Russia isn't going to make trade easy for the UK. And the US froze £300 billion of Russian assets. So they're not going to make it easy for the US. Biden says he wants regime change. He walked that back quickly, but he did say that when he visited Poland. And then the EU, of course, have put all kinds of sanctions on Russia, so they can't use the SWIFT banking system and so on, and want to ban imports. They want to ban imports at the same time as wanting to buy imports, which is absolutely ridiculous. They really don't know what they're doing. But as I say, what's going to be incoming is not just oil for rubles, but everything for rubles. So if you want to buy fertilizer, if you want to buy food, if you want to buy wheat, if you want to buy any kind of commodities, grown or made or manufactured or dug out of the ground from Russia or the Donbass region or Belarus, you're going to have to pay in rubles for those things. And that's going to be much, much harder for the West and everyone that Russia calls an unfriendly country. So just be prepared that this is incoming, and this is going to make the price of food skyrocket if it comes from Russia. Or the Ukraine. So wheat, for example, the price of wheat is going to be going up, and the mainstream media is sounding the alarm on this because the people, they know it's coming. They can't hide the fact that this is coming anymore, but they're trying to blame Putin for this, when actually it's their own stupidity in escalating the war in Ukraine, on the top of lockdowns, on the top of climate alarmist nonsense, which has made the price of energy much higher already, that this is coming. And I've heard one commentator actually suggest that what might happen is even worse than that, because if this continues, what Putin might do is just say, we're not going to sell anything to any unfriendly countries, rubles or not. And that would be not something that's done out of necessity, because Russia cannot access its bank accounts in Washington, in London and Frankfurt. Can't access them because of the sanctions. Their money in there has been frozen, so they can't accept any payments in those bank accounts. They have to say, you've got to pay us in Moscow in rubles, because they simply can't get the payments there. Why would you accept a payment into a bank account in New York which is frozen and you're not going to be able to use the money? So if you want payment for something, you say, well, you know, you have to pay in rubles in Moscow where we can use the money. That's just something they've done out of necessity because of the sanctions that the collective Western regimes have put on Russia. But if he does this, if he goes on and says, well, we're not going to sell you anything, and we're just going to let you go cold and hungry, that would be actually a first economic strike back against the collective West, which you can understand because the collective Western regimes have been really antagonistic to the Putin regime. Of course, I've said, you know, they've said they want regime change and they want to cripple the Russian economy. So, if you're saying that, then, what do they expect? Do they expect them to roll over and ask for their tummy to be tickled? No, you're poking the bear. The bear's going to strike back. So, as I've always said from the beginning, don't poke the bear, try to stroke the bear, de-escalate, and calm everything down. Stop giving weapons to National Socialists, because stop putting sanctions on Russia and trying to punish ordinary Russian people, the whole nation of Russia, for whatever you think of what the people in the government there are doing. Putting sanctions on a whole nation, which is the major provider of food and minerals in the world, is not like putting sanctions on Somalia or something. It doesn't work in the same way. You can put all the sanctions on a small country like Burkina Faso or Suriname. You like, it's not going to affect the collective West. But you put sanctions on Russia, it's going to affect the collective West. And of course, everybody is like looking at this, and people are going to realize soon that the actions that they've taken, the regimes in the collective West have taken, is what is causing cold and hunger when the winter comes. So get ready for food for rubles, and perhaps even a total cut-off of exports of anything from Russia to the collective West. And think about what that will mean over the winter for you. I'm not saying it's going to happen, and I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm just saying, look at how things are developing, and think about what you're going to do in the worst case scenario, because of the stupidity of Western leaders is leading up to this escalation of economic war, which is going to affect ordinary families around the collective West in ways which nobody alive has experienced before, or very few people alive have experienced before, if this kind of hardship will come in. Okay, well, I think I've said enough on that. Hope you have a good day wherever you are. God bless you all.